satisfy us, not give us what we want, but make us content with what we have, where we are in life. And so he kind of repeats that a little bit more directly, a little bit more, with hyperbole. He really drills down into that truth that you're not guaranteed satisfaction, and life can be incredibly unsatisfying if you don't find it through God. If God doesn't give you that satisfaction, it can be dissatisfying, it can be disappointing, it can be hopeless, it can be even unsure what comes next. Now that's kind of a retread of things that we've already set up at this point. I'm not saying don't read chapter 6. Please read chapter 6. I'm not skipping it because it's not inspired or it's not applicable for any of that reasons. It's a retread or a repeat of things that we've already read and discussed. But the other reason is because it's the 5th Sunday of the month, and we have welcomed everybody into this room. We are pumped that our kids are here this morning to be able to celebrate with us, worship with us, be challenged with us. But there's a metaphor I would like to not address in chapter 6, just because I don't want to cause that discussion for you. I don't want to initiate those thoughts earlier than we need to be. And so parents, you can read it and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about when you read that. And so because it's a retread, because it's a repeat of what we've already said, and because that metaphor or illustration that he uses, I prefer not to unpack in this broad of an audience. We're going to move on to chapter 7. So hopefully you'll forgive me for that. But again, read chapter 6, be challenged by chapter 6, and consider, am I unsatisfied to this extent? Do I find life to be this unsatisfying? If true, God is the one who gives satisfaction. God is the one who can give us the ability to be content with. If you're like me, you're like, I'm going to fill up half a tank just in case. Right? So we'll only do half a tank, and then we'll see, maybe I was right, maybe I was wrong, and then, so that's a little dilemma. Slightly larger dilemma. You may have faced, or 3 times more than it should. So, larger dilemma. Do we take that trip? Right? Or do we take that trip? Larger dilemma. I have to buy a car. Right? And that's an even bigger dilemma. What do I do about it? Do we make this last as long as we possibly can? Or how do I do it? But the truth is, in the last while for all of us, there have been more than just financial dilemmas and tricky situations in the past few years. How do I deal with COVID in my own life? How do I deal with how other people are dealing with COVID in their own lives? Right? How do I deal with it? How do they deal with it? How do I deal with how they're dealing with it? How do they deal with how I'm dealing with it? Follow that? Right? The dilemmas. How should I vote in our last 2 or 3 years? How should I handle all of these situations? How do I live in light of changing life in sticky situations? And that's not to mention all the other dilemmas that we face relating to family and relationships. And some of you even had that. Do I go spend time with my family at Memorial Day? Or would we be better off if we all just kept our distance? Right? For a number of different reasons. Dilemmas and situations. Dilemmas about life decisions, about dilemmas with sin and struggles there. Ethics and ethical choices. There's a lot of dilemmas, a lot of situations, and maybe we've each felt or feel like we're just kind of, I don't know what to do. I have no idea, right? I have no idea what I'm doing. And what's tempting and even very easy to do is to just set aside a lot of those decisions and say, well, I'll just wait for the gas tank runs empty, and then we'll see, right? Or I'll just not mention this in front of my family, or I'll just not see them, or we'll get to it when we get to it, we'll make that decision. Maybe it won't, be consequential. But they do see us. They are dilemmas. They don't go away, right? And that doesn't work. It doesn't work to just kick the can down the road because it sometimes just gets bigger and bigger, but it's always there. However, this is what the teacher is going to address this morning, and so we're going to begin with that. Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verses 1 to 4. The teacher says this. He says, a good name is better than fine perfume. The day of death better than the day of birth. It is better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, for death is the destiny of everyone. The living should take this to heart. Frustration is better than laughter, because a sad face is good for the heart. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but a heart of fools is in the house of pleasure. it's clever in his day because it really takes his readers, his original audience, off guard a little bit. Because he starts with a very popular proverb. In verse 1, it's the first line there, where as they were getting ready for the morning, hey, a good name is better than fine perfume. You don't need to go to the store and get more. You've got what you need. It's better to be a good woman than it is to just dress yourself up like that. I can imagine those conversations. In fact, Solomon included this proverb from verse 1 there in his collection of proverbs. One of them, it is recorded, a version of it is recorded in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1. You can kind of reference that if you want to. But this is a popular proverb. And its meaning is really just as popular today for us. The character of a person is the most important thing. Right? That's the most important thing. You can dress up the outside, but it doesn't change the inside. You can spray perfume all over it, but it doesn't change, what's rotten inside. Being impressive in character is more important than impressively presenting yourself. Being impressive inside is more important than being impressive outside. And really, in Solomon's day, and in the teacher's day, the rich could buy only the rich could buy expensive perfume, right? And so rather than working towards affording perfume to impress people, work on your character to impress them. It's really what that proverb is pointing out. Like, you're not going to be able to afford expensive perfume. You think that is great that the teacher quotes this popular proverb. In the day of death, better than the day of birth. It's really took a twist there. Really took a turn there. Like, I was tracking with you, and then you lost me on this whole funeral thing. Like, that was great, and now I didn't see it go in this direction. It seems like this is a sudden jump to a completely different topic, but it isn't. He's taking their understanding and our agreement in general. We agree, right? What's inside is more consequential than what's outside. What's inside is more important than what's outside. We agree with that the character of a person is more important than their appearance. And he says, so in the same way that what's inside is more consequential than what's outside, death is more consequential than birth. Death carries with it more significance than birth. So what's he getting at? What's he trying to point out here? The truth is, and this is true of all of us, I assume. I mean, unless you're an unusual person, I don't want to call you weird. Birthday party, there's cake, there's ice cream, some of there's balloons. Oh, they're gone. We got them down. There were some balloons stuck in the ceiling on Friday from not a birthday party, but from a graduation. But everybody loves a good birthday party, and we celebrate what he calls in our house of feasting. Right? It's better to go to a house of organs than here. Right? We love birthday parties. Everyone loves a good birthday party. But when was the last time you appreciated a good funeral? We tend to look more, like we put it on the calendar, obviously, because we know their birthdays are going to come, they're going to happen. But we look forward to that. But we would not be too eager to write down the funeral day and then look forward to that and this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. We want to look forward to the birthday party. We don't look forward to a good or appreciate a good funeral. And I don't mean enjoy it. I don't mean enjoy it. I mean appreciate and make the most of the funeral. Like we don't tend to do that. We don't look forward to funerals like we do birthday parties. But the teacher says in verse 2, he says it is best. They're more consequential than birthdays. Funerals are more of a reality check. Funeral carries with it more consequence. You get dozens and dozens and dozens of birthdays. You go to bunches of birthday parties every year. And if you're like me and your sister has, 7 kids, it's like there's a birthday party every month. But you only get one funeral. You only have one, I don't want to make this sound flippant, but you only have one death day. You get a lot of birthdays. And so the teacher says, place more consideration, place more significance, place more reflection, more consequence on the day of death than on the day of birth. We're so attached to celebrations of life, but the funeral gives us a sobering reality about it all. It's the day birthdays stop. So it's of more consequence, is his point. It's of more consequence. Just like your character is more consequential than what you present, considering that the day birthdays stop is more consequential. Those who are alive really need to consider this, to let it marinate a little bit in your mind. Your coming day of death naturally carries with it more consequences than your next birthday does. This isn't the first time the teacher has done this to us. This might sound a little bit familiar for those of you that have been tracking through the series. He reminded us back in chapter 2 that we can't avoid, meaning we shouldn't avoid, we have to think about this. We can't avoid thinking about death, except that death is a reality because it gives us a better perspective on life. We appreciate it more. And that's what he's saying here. And this may frustrate you. Verse 3. Frustration, it may frustrate you to think about this truth. But frustration is better than laughter. Because a sad face is good for the heart. It may frustrate you thinking about that. It may cause you some apprehension thinking about this. It may cause you sorrow thinking about what the consequences of it are going to be. And you may enjoy the birthday celebration more. Obviously, we enjoy the birthday celebration more. It brings laughter. It brings enjoyment. He's not saying that's bad. He's saying one deserves a little more of your attention. Right? And then in the New Living Translation, it says this is so great in verse 3. Because in the NIV it says that a sad face is good for the heart. The New Living Translation says sadness has a refining influence on us. Letting it sober you a little bit refines you as you think about life in light of that coming day. A sad face is good for the heart. Thinking about the inevitability of death at some point may bring you sorrow, it may bring you sadness, but it's good for you in the long run. It brings you down to earth. In fact, he says it's wise to take note of the funerals. Fools only notice the birthday parties. Only think about those. And there the teacher introduces his main idea with this proverb in verse 4 when he says, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning. It's the heart of a fool that is in the house of pleasure, that only thinks about the birthdays. So this is his main idea with these proverbs. No matter how much we want to ignore it, life is short. Life is short and death is inevitable. And so we need to live with wisdom. Life is short. Now, when I say short, I mean 60, 70, 80 years for 90 years for the majority, right? In the scope of eternity, if I was to put a rope here, start over that wall, and that rope is the length of eternity, right? And it just keeps going, you'd be just a little tiny thing. We need to live with wisdom. We have within us a tendency to ignore or avoid the consequential. It's easier to put on perfume than it is to work on who you are inside. It's easier to think about birthdays than it is about funeral. And we have a tendency to ignore that. But ultimately, this causes us to not want to think about that day and only think about the happy things in life. I don't ignore consequence. I want to. The most consequential is death. I don't want to think about that. But other things that are consequential, like struggles with family, struggles with finance, how do I deal with this? We pump that down the road too because it's easier not to think about consequential things. We push them aside. We procrastinate on decisions. We agonize over obstacles. We drag our feet into confrontation. We pretend like everything is okay so we can avoid those things. But that's not wise. It's foolish. Fools act like everything is a party, everything's okay, the decisions can wait, let's just enjoy this now, and the ultimate expression of faith, the ultimate expression of this foolishness is to completely ignore the fact that there is an end to life for everyone. And so the teacher's point is, because there is an expiration date on your life, accept it and let it affect how you live now. How you deal with all the dilemmas and all the issues of life. Don't accept, kick the can down the road, deal with them now, and live wisely, because there's an expiration date on this. This would be wise. And so his main point is, life is short. So it matters how you live. Live wisely. Life is short. And because life is short, it matters how you live. So live wisely. Paul, in the New Testament, he grew up Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish. Instead, understand what the Lord's will is. There are problems and there are difficulties, and there's not that many of the days. Right? They're against you. Right? They're opposed to you. They're just counting down. They're not counting up. They're not stalled. The days are evil with their dilemmas and their difficulties and the brevity of them. And because you're fully aware that death is inevitable, don't be foolish with your time. Make the most of every opportunity. Don't be foolish with your time. Live wisely, which Paul says means following God's will. Live wisely, because the days are evil, because life is short. It matters how you live, so live wisely. Paul says follow God's will. So what does that mean? How do we do that? The teacher is going to give us a couple of examples. It's not an exhaustive list, just a few examples for us. But before we get to his examples, let's talk a little bit about wisdom, because that's what he's focusing on wisdom. So wisdom in the Bible has a very specific meaning, it's a very specific understanding in Hebrew and in the Jewish world. Wisdom to the teacher, when he says that, is wise in the Old Testament, are those who are able to navigate life or an area of life practically, successfully, with skill, with results. So wisdom is the skill of successful living. Wisdom is the skill of doing well in situations, in diverse situations. A very wise person does well, knows what to do, knows how to be successful in all sorts of situations. And Paul would add, when you get to the New Testament, Paul would add, for the New Testament believer, that would be us too. The skill of successful living in a godly way. The skill of successful living with the will of God in mind. In a God-honoring way. In fact, the teacher places a high priority, a high premium on wisdom, which he explains in verses 11 and 12. So I want you to jump down in chapter 7 to verses 11 and 12, the last two verses for this morning. The teacher says, wisdom, the skill of successful living in our world, godly living. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing, and it benefits those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter, like you imagine money is a shelter, but the advantage of knowledge, which is a synonym for wisdom here, is this. Wisdom preserves those who have it. The teacher here reveals that he places a high premium on wisdom. Wisdom is very, very valuable. And some versions make it sound like, when you read it, it sounds like if you can have wisdom and you can have money, then you're set. Right? When you read that, you might see if you have wisdom and you have money, then you're set. But that's not consistent with the teacher's message so far. The better translation of verses 11 and 12 is that wisdom, like an inheritance, wisdom is like an inheritance, and it is good, and it has its benefits. But, he goes on to say, it's even better than that inheritance of money. It's not. It's like an inheritance because it's good, it's valuable if you want it, but it's even better than that. It's even better than that money, better than that inheritance that you would get. You think money and wealth are good. Wisdom is better, is what he's saying in verses 11 and 12. For those who are living, wisdom is invaluable. Knowing how to successfully live in situations in a godly way is significantly more valuable than money. Like you imagine, we talked about this last week, you imagine money can shelter you. You imagine money can protect you. Your bank account can preserve you. Wisdom can do that and actually does shelter you. Right? You imagine that money is a shelter, but the advantage is wisdom actually preserves. Wisdom is far more valuable to us as we navigate all those dilemmas every time pursuing wisdom. In fact, Solomon, again, in his collection of Proverbs, calls wisdom a treasure worth hunting for. In Proverbs chapter 2, verses 2 to 5, he says, turn your ear to wisdom, apply your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as you would for a hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and finding the knowledge of God. Wisdom is like a hidden treasure. It is worth hunting for, searching for. How can I successfully live in a godly way in this situation? Spend more time figuring that out than wondering, can my bank account recover this if I fail? And the reason wisdom is so valuable is because it comes from God. It is God's wisdom, right? It comes from the Lord. So when we partner with God to successfully navigate life, when we submit to His will in our situations, we have found something far more valuable and worth our limited time on this earth, worth more than wealth. So consider this from the teacher. One day, you are going to die. Your upcoming birthday will be nice, but have you thought about your funeral? One day you are going to die. So now that we've cleared the air about that, how are you going to live? Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I committed it for you. You've come to terms with it, I hope. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, there's a date. You don't know it. God knows it. There is a date, and that day is coming. So now that that's there, how are you going to live? How are we going to live? If you believe in God, choose wisdom. It's the only logical choice, the teacher says. Life is short, so it matters how you live. Live wisely. Pursue how God says to live in all those situations. So now he gives us examples. And we're going to work our way through these pretty quickly. So now he gives us examples, these practical applications that we can walk out of here this morning and use. The main idea is valuable, and hopefully that pierces us, right? Sword through the spirit and the soul, and gives us something to walk away and say, maybe I do need to think more about how am I living wisely, because life is short. I'm not going to get too many chances to try this again and again and to do-overs. But he's going to give us a couple of examples that we can walk out this morning with as well. And so these are, in a way, they're unrelated. It's his thoughts. He's just thinking through this. Okay, so how am I going to live? Here's some great ideas. The first one is this. Hear and respond to correction. Since life is short and it matters how you live, then hear and respond to correction. This is a wise thing to do in the situations where you're corrected. Verse 5. It is better to heed the rebuke of a wise person than to listen to the song of fools. Like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of fools as to it meaningless. I don't know, you've probably never, maybe you have, I've never burned thorns under a pot. So pine branches. Have you ever put pine branches over a campfire and you've heard that popping, crackling, and burning quick, right? Imagine that instead. Imagine that, because that fits our context a little bit better. But since life is short, since death is an inevitable reality, it's better to listen to somebody who's wise rebuking you than it is to listen to the song of fools. Or later he says it's the laughter of fools, right? That's the crackling thing in the fire. His description, that phrase is actually specific in his culture. He's specifically referring to the sound of party. It sounds fun. When you're outside listening to that, it sounds fun. It sounds like a blast. So imagine yourself outside of a house. So you can hear the music, right, going through. People are laughing. You're hearing the window like a crazy person. You see everybody having a lot of fun, right? They're chatting, they're playing games, whatever it is, whatever it's fun to do. Imagine that happening in your house, right? You're standing outside, and somebody, in due respect, walks up outside and tells you, don't go to that party. Because you're thinking about it. You're thinking about going inside, you got an invitation, you stand outside, it was a lot of fun, and then somebody you respect, somebody wise, walks up beside you and says, listen, don't go into that party. Don't go there. Why would they tell you that? The party looks fun. The reason is because they know, in the teacher's example, he knows the party, the fun, the laughter isn't going to last. Skip the party. Skip the party. Do something more significant because life is short. He's using this example that's just supposed to be it's not a prescription that never go have fun. He's trying to get you to think about it's better to listen to if you hear that correction, if a wise person warns you, don't waste your time celebrating, or don't do this, or turn away from this, you're messing up. If a wise person tells you something, or a wise being, listen to them. Don't go into that party. But the principle behind this goes even further. The fundamental truth is, it is wise to listen and respond to biblical correction. It's wise to listen, respond to biblical correction, whether it comes from a godly individual, but it can come from other places, specifically the one on your lap right now. Paul tells Timothy that's what the Bible is useful for. The Bible is useful for reproof, for rebuke, for correction, for instruction. And so, and we said this a couple of weeks ago, when you open the Bible, life is short, so let it change you. Hear and respond to the correction. And if it tells you don't go to that party, don't go. If it tells you stop, stop. Because life is short. When we listen to the words of the wise, a godly individual, a godly book. If it tells you go do this, and do it well, and do it right, then go do it. Go enjoy it. When you open the Bible, life is short, so let it change you. Let the biblical truth win. And so when it says don't, then don't. When you read it and if truth is clear, don't go and do the opposite. If it's clear what the truth is, don't ignore it. Don't kick it down the road and to I'll do it a later day. But you don't know if there is a later day. If it's telling you to do it today, do it today because life is short, so live wisely. It's most valuable to you now. You don't know it's going to be valuable to you in a week because you don't know if you'll have a week. It's valuable to you today. And what's important now with your time is to demonstrate trust in God by hearing and responding to His truth and His correction. And this correction might also come through a brother or a sister in Christ. They may express a biblical truth or a caution or a concern to you. Just because it hurts doesn't mean you should disregard it. It's not fun to think about a funeral. Those wounds are better. That's another one of Solomon's Proverbs. That's not me. I'm not that smart. That's from Solomon in the Proverbs. It is wise, it is invaluable for you to hear and respond to biblical correction now, when it's given. That's his first example. It says life is short. Live wisely. Listen and respond. Hear and respond to correction. The second example he gives us is going to be in verse 7, and that is to pursue humility and integrity. Since life is short and it matters how you live, then pursue humility and integrity. And we can go back to his very first proverb they started with, right? A better name, a good name is better than fine perfume. Pursue humility and integrity. This is verse 7. He says, extortion turns a wise person into a fool, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Explain to you what he's saying there, because this verse can be a little bit confusing. But since life is short, since death only comes once, place a priority on humility in your life and on integrity in your life. Now, the teacher's example references someone who oppresses, someone who's doing the extortion, who's abusing other people, who takes advantage of other people, and there's pride there. There's pride in that person, and that pride reveals a lack of wisdom. Right? Extortion reveals that a person who appears wise, they seem to be doing really well with life. People really respond to them. Well, then you find it just looked like they were. That pride reveals a lack of wisdom. The teacher says, don't be that person with your limited time. Don't be a proud person with your limited time. Be humble instead. Don't hurt other people. When Paul tells verse Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Don't be proud in life with other people. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. You can have the front seat. I'll take the back seat. Why? Because the Bible told me to, and I want to hear and respond to correction, and life is short. And so I need to be humble, not proud, and put myself over other people. And the teacher also connects humility in his mind is kind of the same integrity matters and life is short. So be humble and have integrity. Doing the right thing, even if it hurts, matters because life is short. And if we want to successfully navigate this life in a wise way, be humble and have integrity. Put others first and do the right thing even when it hurts. There's limited time, and so it's invaluable for you to pursue humility and integrity with however much time you have. That's his second example. Life is short, so it matters how you live. So here, respond to correction, pursue humility and integrity. And the third example, he's going to give us two more. The third example is live patiently. Because life is short, and it matters how you live, then live patiently. This is in verse 8 and 9. The end of a matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. Do not be quickly provoked in your spirit, for anger resides in the lap of fools. So this one seems a little bit contradictory, right? Because maybe you're feeling this way too. I've instilled in you now, that we've been reading this from the teacher, there's a sense of urgency, right? Almost a sense of like, oh man, I gotta do this because life is short, life is short, life is short. And then he said, hold on a second. Slow down. But it doesn't also mean that we need to act rashly, that we need to act quickly. The teacher suggests instead that we live patiently because life is short, because there's a limited amount of days. Live patiently. Sometimes in the moment we're tested and we're tempted to react. And in his example, it's an anger. He gives an example of anger because that's what we can all relate to. We can all easily see, oh yeah, flash in the pan, the temper goes, and suddenly I'm reacting to anger. And he says that's not wise. It's not a wise use of your time. I'm not even going to argue it is a wise use of your time. You'd be like, oh no, it was pretty valuable when I lost my temper and wasted that day on how angry I got. Hurt a lot of people, damaged a few relationships. But the teacher says, clearly that's not wise. That's foolish. And I think he wants us to all agree. We all say, yeah, that's foolish. It is not respecting that life is short. And in this ironic twist, the teacher says that respecting the brevity of life biblically means let things play out for a minute. Let things play out for a minute. Give things patience. Because the truth is, the end of the matter is usually better than the beginning. So give it time. Bob Miller, one of our friends that moved down to Florida, but he told me one time when we were doing the work there with he told me, let's just water it and let it grow. Water it and let it grow. Give it time, give it what it needs, let it grow, and then you'll know better how to act. And I love that. I love that. The teacher says, often the end is in his book, in James chapter 1, verses 19 and 20. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. So because time is short, because life is short, it matters how you live. Put on the brakes on your reactions, on your hot takes, on your quick judgments. Being slow to react, being patient, produces Christ-likeness. And that's wise. That's wise. Time gives clarity, and yes, life is short, but because it's short, don't react instantly and make things worse. And waste that time. Give each situation time for the flash of emotion to pass. This is very hard. You can't do this on your own. You have to have God's help to cool the emotions of the moment and pray before the situation comes. God, I know I'm a volatile person. God, life is short. I don't want to ruin time with my impatience, my quick reactions. Give me patience. So play the long game, because the end of the matter is better than its beginning, and patience is better than pride. And trust God. Trust God that if I give this time to marinate and for deep breaths, the result will likely be much more godly and wiser and better with my limited time. This is an invaluable and wise way to make the most of your limited days. Life is short, it matters how you live. So here, respond to correction, pursue humility and integrity fourth thing, the final example, live in the present. Live in the present. And this may be one of the hardest things for some of us. But live in wise to ask such questions. Live in the present. Since you aren't going to live forever on this earth, a definite, inevitable reality, live in the present. This is specifically in regard to the past. It's very easy and it's very tempting to live in the past and dwell in the past. And the teacher expresses this wistfulness. You see it there. He expresses a wistfulness that we all kind of have. We all tend to have this fondness and this rose-colored lens of the past in many ways, for what once was. And the teacher quickly says, that's not wise. Like we can do that, like we can say, man, the old days, were the old days better than me? There's tension. And God has you somewhere else now. You're in a different place now. So live in the present, don't live in the past. These are great memories. But you're losing daylight if you're letting what happened or what was in the past affect everything in the present. At that point, some of you are hearing this and you're thinking, you are wrong. I don't wish for the past. I can't get over the past. I'm having a hard time dealing with the past. Sometimes the past wasn't better, it was worse, and we live in the past because of guilt or because of past failures and decisions, and that's also not wise. It's also not wise. If you've dealt with that with God, if you live with that guilt or that past failures or those past decisions, if you've dealt with that with God, Jesus has forgiven you. It's done. Learn from him, but live in the present faithfully, wisely, in a godly way. Paul, of anyone other, leading Christians into traps so that he can have them arrested and then forced into the arena or into their deaths, murdered. You would think that if anybody struggles with their past, Paul would struggle significantly with that, having to face the families of people he sent to their death and trying to convince them that he's changed now. And this murderer of Christians turned prominent Christian leader said this in Philippians chapter 3. His words, one thing I do, forget what is behind and strain towards what is ahead. Press on towards the goal, to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward in Christ Jesus. My eternal life is there. And I'm going to live in the present and press forward today because my eternal life is there. Now this is something that God gives us the ability to do. You can't will this. You can't will that away. This is something God gives us the ability to do. That's what, go back and read chapter 6. That satisfaction, that contentment with where we are now, that dealing with the past, or even that's something that God gives us the ability to do, something that we work with Him on doing. But it is wise for you to do it. It is wise and it is invaluable for you to live in the present. So deal with it with God and do what you have to do spiritually, through prayer, through the Bible, to live in the present. So these are just 4 examples from the teacher of how to live wisely because life is short. Think of your life. Think of your current situations. Look at those 4 points. Won't these help you navigate your days better? If you do these things, if you do these 4 things, if you hear and respond to correction, if you pursue humility and integrity, if you live patiently and you live in the present, will these not, if you do it in a godly way, will these not help you navigate life better today? And what's more is you will discover more ways to live in successful godly ways as you study God's Word on your own. And you can add to that list and apply those too because they'll help you navigate better and better all those dilemmas that you face in life and make the most of your limited time that you have. And so this morning, we are being asked to recognize and acknowledge life is short. It matters how you live. Please live wisely. Let's pray. give us the desire to recognize how true this is, and to determine and acknowledge and identify the areas in which we don't live wisely. We are not living in the most godly way that we could. Whether it's in listening to your word, or if it's just in dealing with the quickness of our emotions, or whether it's being humble and living with it. There is. And it's right there for your wisdom in those situations, and commit to doing it.